side. Who are the breakout players for the 49ers in 2022, and who are the most underrated? More after this.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on 3. 1, 2, 3, dominate.
What's good, everybody? We're changing it up. I'm Rohan. That is Suneil. Normally, you see us on Wednesdays on his channel. Today, we're doing it on my channel. How you doing, Suneil?
It's fantastic, man. I enjoy this. It's like, even though we're all digital or whatever, it feels like we're in a different room, right? The video is different. The outlook is different. I'm a big fan of it, man. I finally made it. Now I feel like I made it. I finally made it on 49ers RedZone channel, man. Let's go.
It's lovely. It's lovely. And I mean, we're always happy to have you here. Today, we're talking some 49ers, back at it again after a little break. OTAs was last week. We had 1 day of media availability. The next day of media availability is this upcoming Wednesday in 2 days. Obviously, we're excited to see more football, more Trey Lance, more everything. But over the weekend, we see some interesting news, which we'll get to later. But this entire team, it's kind of changed a bit, hasn't it, over this past offseason? A good amount of roster turnover. And so just an outlook on the roster. What are you thinking heading into 2022?
I'm actually a big fan, Rohan, because I think that, there's a good, healthy team, has a good mix of veterans, and is constantly developing that next wave of young talent to be infused in. And I think the 49ers front office has done a really good job finding or isolating where the team had its biggest weaknesses, and then utilizing free agency to solve a lot of those problems, and then utilizing the draft to really build depth, and then also look a year, 2 years into the future as far as having people that could jump in when inevitably guys either age out or move on to bigger and better opportunities where they can make more money, where the 49ers just can't necessarily maybe pay them that level. So I think the flexibility of what they've done with this roster to still have it be one of the best rosters top down as far as talent and depth, to me, I'm a big fan of what the 49ers projections are going to be going into the year with this type of roster.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, right? A lot of people had a lot of criticism for 49ers offseason. And I mean, so Jimmy Garoppolo is still on the roster. We can understand the logic behind it, but he's still on the roster. There's still a couple of questions that still need to be answered regarding him, maybe the offensive line and other positions. But overall, when you look at the entirety of the roster, it's tough to say the 49ers got worse, right? A good amount of positions they upgraded. Cornerback, and obviously the special teams unit, which was one of the worst in the NFL last year. Those were the two biggest flaws last year on this team. They improved both of them. And while some other positions got worse, they did have reinforcements, albeit maybe reinforcements to a lesser extent, but they still had a contingency plan at left guard. You lose Laken Tomlinson. You drafted Aaron Banks last year. And all reports so far indicate that he's looking good. So we'll see how he plays in real game time. But, there is a contingency plan in a way. So you're right. I do like how the 49ers have constructed this roster. They've set themselves up where they can compete for a second straight year, which surprisingly hasn't been done in any Kyle Shanahan coach team since 2008. Can you believe that? Kyle Shanahan has not had a back-to-back winning season since 2008.
Yeah, and I mean, it's because Kyle Shanahan's biggest Achilles heel under this regime was the quarterback room. Like, he never had a backup plan for, literally a backup plan for when the starter went down. And unfortunately, the starter that he was dependent on was Jimmy Garoppolo, who is only available every other season. So just the quarterback level of drop off from Jimmy Garoppolo to a Nick Mullins or a CJ Beathard was just too drastic of a drop off to really maintain any type of success. And like I said, Jimmy Garoppolo just stays healthy every other season. Every other season, it's a season-ending injury. So, so yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I think now Shanahan and Lynch both understand that, which is why obviously they got younger with Trey Lance, and then got a guy like Nate Sudfeld, who they seem very high on as well. In case Trey Lance, he needs to spell Trey Lance for a game or two here due to injuries.
Yeah, definitely. So now let's get into it a little bit. We've talked about the roster, the outlook of it, but let's narrow down some players. Who do you think are the breakout players for the 49ers in 2022?
I mean, we've talked about it so much, Rohan. I think Brandon Ayuk this is his year to really do what Debo did last season, as far as how he was able to elevate himself in the eyes of just everybody outside of the 49er faithful. I think that Brandon Ayuk has that type of season this year. It's just all the ingredients to having a breakout season. Brandon Ayuk has, right? He's going into his third year, which is usually where people feel more confident. And the third year, right? Debo's last year was his third year. That's what his breakout season. Brandon Ayuk is going into his third year. The shift in quarterback from Jimmy Garoppolo to Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo did a lot of things well, but one thing that he was shy was throwing it to the past a certain yardage as far as in the air. Unfortunately for Brandon Ayuk, that was the routes that he was asked to run consistently. So now with Trey Lance there at the helm, he is willing to take those chances. He is willing to throw it a little bit further than what Jimmy was willing to throw. So Brandon Ayuk is just going to have more opportunity with someone who we already know is electric with the ball in his hands. I think is panning to be, he's going to be the breakout star of this season.
Yeah, I think that's a very good option, right? When you talk about Brandon Ayuk and the routes he ran, a lot of out routes, about 15 yards down the field. There's an entire thread of Jimmy Garoppolo just not choosing to throw to Brandon Ayuk despite him being open. And when you have a quarterback now that we have in Trey Lance that has shown that he can throw to all facets of the field, look at the Texans game, look at the throwing chart on it. There's literally a throw to every portion of the field. Now, accuracy is the concern. We'll see how it goes over a 17-game period, but the option of throwing everywhere is very important. And before I continue, got to give a shout out to my sister Mariah out here. Thank you for tuning in. Always appreciate the support. But Brandon Ayuk, he runs those routes and he runs them with fluidity. He's open a good amount of the time. And you're thinking now with a full 2 seasons under his belt, going into his third year where a lot of receivers tend to break out. Also, he has the work ethic now. It was apparent over the second half of last year. He can start the season running. He, like in his rookie year, the last couple of games were limited because of injury. In the sophomore year, the first 6 games were limited because he was still picking up pace back from his hamstring injury. Still needed the effort to show up. And so now you've got an entire season to really go through what Brandon Ayuk can do. And when you take those 2 seasons, in his rookie year, he would have eclipsed 1,000 yards if he played 16 games. In his sophomore year, from week 7 to 17, or 7 to 18, you take that over a 16-game season or 17-game season, it's 1,128 yards. So really, a breakout season to me is 1,000 yards. He's shown that he can do it over a period of time. Now, can you string it over a course of 16, 17 games? I believe he can, and that's why I think he should get his first 1,000-yard season in 2022. I think that will definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, when you talk about just Brandon Ayuk's importance to the offense as well, last season when Brandon Ayuk had at least 45 yards receiving, the 49ers went 6-2. So good things happen when Brandon Ayuk is getting the ball, not only for Brandon Ayuk, but also for the team overall. Like having that option aside on the other side of Debo and a guy like Kittle, knowing that the rush attack is going to be the way that it is, it's just too many problems to solve for any defense. And when you really have Brandon Ayuk there, motivated and knowing he could run a route and he might actually get the ball, I think that's just going to change the dynamic of things. And you mentioned something really important as far as the work ethic. It really sounds a lot like maturity, right? That interview that he did after the OTAs in day one, he really just kind of took some accountability for himself. He said putting himself in the role that he is in right now as the receiver, one of the receivers, like him and Jennings are the only two that are at OTAs that know the playbook out of the receiving room. Everybody else is brand new, either through free agency or through the draft. Now people are looking to him as far as knowing, asking those questions about things. And he realizes from being the leader now how much he was lacking from that. And I think that's a testament to him as far as his openness to being coached and criticizing, and his maturity and evolution as not only a football player, but also a person. But also props to Shanahan, props to the 49ers coaching staff, because I'll be the first to say I was somebody who was very critical of Shanahan for not utilizing Brandon Ayuk as much last season. And clearly he had a plan in mind and knew what was best for Ayuk and coaching him the way that he coached. And I think it's all going to pan out and show out into a year 3 season where Brandon Ayuk takes the top off. And I think Shanahan, for coaching him as hard as he did last season, definitely deserves some praise when that happens, because where other guys like me would have probably just given him the opportunity because of the talent, Shanahan knew there was more to get out of him, and you saw it at the second half of the season and hopefully going into this year as well.
Yeah, I just checked Twitter and I just saw some pretty bad news. Jeff Gladney of the Arizona Cardinals, 25 years old, just passed away from a car accident last night. Yeah, that's especially on Memorial Day. Man, that sucks to hear. Prayers out to him and his family. Really, that's just tragic to hear from such a young guy. Yeah, wow. But Brandon, thank you from Forever Faithful podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Your words on Brandon Ayuk, yeah, you're spot on. I do think that at least this is the first time where he's going to have that opportunity, right? Especially, I think what's important, Deebo Samuel isn't there right now. Ayuk is going to get a majority of the first team reps at that first receiver spot. I want to see him go up against Charvarius Ward. I want to see him go up against Emmanuel Mosley. I want to see him take on those tough battles, see because really, if you go up against the best, that's the best way to master your craft. I'll throw out another name. It's not necessarily a breakout, but a lot of people might expect him to be more of a blocker this year for some reason. But I actually think George Kittle might get a little more unleashed with Trey Lance at the helm. Now, I understand we didn't draft another blocking tight end. Charlie Warner, though, he had 23% of the offensive snaps ahead of Ross Dwelley. They prefer Warner to Dwelley, and obviously 23% isn't that big. But I do think that with Lance's ability to maneuver around the pocket, and also the necessity for a safety blanket, we saw it in the first practice of OTAs. And I'm not taking too much from the first practice. 12 of the 16 passes completions were to tight ends and running backs. Tight ends are a safety blanket for Trey Lance, and I think that that's why George Kittle might be utilized a lot more, even if it's in short gains, not necessarily the deep ball as much to a tight end. I do think that that's going to be very valuable, and so I think George Kittle might have a pretty solid year. Hopefully, get back to the 1,000 realm after missing out on it last season.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, for all the weapons that the 49ers have as far as receiving wise, it looks like Trey Lance is going to have to throw the ball like 30, 35 times a game just to give everybody their opportunity. But clearly, I don't think that's going to be the case. I just think it's going to be a lot more effective, right? And I think the Yak Bros are going to be full effect, right? You're going to see some underneath routes where guys like Kittle and Deebo are able to break loose with just their ability to break tackles and get yards after the catch. And then a guy like Ayuk, I think, is going to benefit from just being able to run those deep routes and actually get, balls thrown to him. So I think everybody's numbers are just going to be elevated because the offense overall is just going to have a different dynamic that wasn't there. Not to say that the offense is going to change much. I don't think schematically the offense is going to change, Rohan, but I do think just because of the decision-making that Trey has, the ability to throw the ball a little bit deeper, it's going to give defenses something else to think about that they didn't have to think about when Jimmy was there, right? So it's just going to open up the field a little bit more, which I think gives these players more rooms where now instead of having to break maybe 2 tackles, they could just be one-on-one with somebody and just have to break that, which is going to give them more yards after the catch as well.
Yeah, definitely. Defensively, I know you've talked about one guy a good amount who you think is going to have a breakout season. Talk to me about that one guy, Jordan Willis, over there on that defensive line.
I do think Jordan Willis is going to have a big year, guys, but that's not the guy I'm going to say because
Okay.
obviously Jordan Willis isn't going to be necessarily a starter. I do, but I'm not backing off of that. I still think Jordan Willis is having 6 to 8 sacks this season. He's going to be the next guy that, you know, goes off into free agency and gets a big contract because he won up with the 49ers. But I think this is really another third-year guy, same draft class as Brandon Ayuk. This is Kinlaw's year, man. Clearly, you know, for better or for worse, you know, he's in the media right now, not necessarily for the best reasons, you know, and I like the passion because he's hungry, right? He understands what the narrative around him is. He understands that being a first round, you know, pick, the guy that was supposed to replace such a highly favored player by not only the team, but also the fan base, and DeForest Buckner, he hasn't lived up to expectations. And it's not because of lack of ability, it's because of lack of availability. So he looks in the best shape, Rohan, that I've seen. You know, he looks slim, he looks trim, he looks, you know, very fit. Hopefully that knee can hold up. I mean, he's talking a big game, and I do believe everything in his heart believes that he's going to go out here and prosper. And I know it's kind of wacky, but when Armstead and Grant Cohn got into it, Armstead did have a breakout season and had some good numbers. So now that, you know, Grant Cohn and Kinlaw have gotten into it, in my book, that's a praise that he's going to go out there and have a really big season. And, you know, if he does have that type of year, this defensive line, Rohan, probably going to be the best in the league.
Oh yeah, it definitely could be that case, and I think Kinlaw is due for something, right? And for him, a breakout season doesn't necessarily have to mean some crazy, crazy statistical year, but really just staying healthy for a majority of the year. Kinlaw hasn't necessarily had the chance to develop. When you look at what he's done, right? In 2020, that was his first season. It was a season in the COVID year where he didn't have a full off season. He played in 12, 14 games, started 12 games, I believe, that season. Got I don't think his sack numbers were high, but he was pretty good in the run game. However, he wasn't around many people. Nick Bosa got out in week 2, suffered a torn ACL. Solomon Thomas back then suffered a torn ACL in week 2 as well. Kerry Hyder was really the main guy. And while I think Kerry Hyder is okay, a lot of his sacks were, you know, as a result of hustle plays in a way. Kerry Hyder, he's an all right player, but it's not necessarily to the caliber of a Nick Bosa, right? So this is his first year really where he's healthy and is surrounded by such supreme talent on that defensive line. And especially one other thing that really didn't happen for a majority of 2020, given the injuries, was Arik Armstead on the inside. He was on the outside for a portion because of the injuries. And obviously, you want to play your better players on the outside when they have that flexibility. Armstead should slot in as one of the interior defensive linemen for this team for the majority of this season with the amount of edge talent that we have. I think Armstead's presence right next to Kinlaw is only going to help him and really, hopefully, transition him from a 2-down player to a 3-down player. He had 1.5 sacks in his rookie season. Hopefully, he can build on that and have a good couple sacks this year as well. But that's definitely a good point that you make.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of your statements, you know, I think a lot of people look for, you know, defensive linemen. Their success comes in those sack numbers, but I agree with you. I think that the biggest reason why Kinlaw needs to have a big season is to really shore up that run defense. That is the Achilles heel. If you're going to say the 49ers have a weakness on defense, it is their inconsistency with defending the run. And the loss of DJ Jones, a lot of people are stating that because of how good DJ Jones was in the run rush defense, that could be another big hole for the 49ers. I agree with you. I think Kinlaw, even in his rookie season where we did get to see him play at an extended period of time, he showed that maybe he isn't as refined as a pass rusher, but as a run defender, I think he showed that he could be good there. And to piggyback again off of another point that you make, if he can come and be the physical player, be the guy that could get into the backfield and make the running back, you know, have to make quicker decisions, or the quarterback make quicker decisions. Now, all of a sudden, the offensive line has to make some tough decisions. Do I double team Bosa? Do I double team Armstead? And now all of a sudden, with Kinlaw there as well, there's only so many people you could bring into the box to be able to, defend these type of guys. So that means that Armstead, Bosa, or Kinlaw, or, if it's Ebicom on the edge, Drake on the edge, Willis on the edge, one of these guys is going to be able to, be like one-on-one. And, I'm taking the 49ers ability with their talent to go one-on-one against anybody, any offensive line in the league.
Yeah, and really, we don't know how Kinlaw or like these unproven players will fare in these one-on-one opportunities, especially when they haven't necessarily had the pass rushing acumen in terms of experience. But the best way for some player to develop is to get those one-on-one opportunities, not getting chip blocked, not getting double teamed and things like that. With the amount of talent around them, yeah, you're right. There's now an opportunity presented for those players to take over and really capitalize. And so that's what I'm going to be very interested to see. Mariah says, if the Kinlaw we saw in Grant's channel is the same Kinlaw that shows up on the field every week, we should be good. Yeah, I mean, let's see. Let's definitely see, because I think that really all we've heard this offseason is that he's progressing well, right? Shanahan said that he's progressing better than expected alongside McGlinchey. And so if the timeline's better than expected at training camp, I expect both of them to be unleashed, especially Kinlaw, given that he really has competition. And so just more fuel to the fire. Let's hope he starts and let's hope he has a good year.
Who do you think on the defensive side is going to be the breakout player?
I think it honestly would be Javon Kinlaw, just given that a lot of the players had their breakout season already or are on the verge of it in upcoming seasons, given that they're young players like a Drake Jackson or maybe even like a guy like Kalia Davis in a couple of years. But when we see it, if Kinlaw struggles early on, there are two guys that really pop out, and that is Hassan Ridgeway and Maurice Hurst over there on that defensive line. I'll go a different route, right? I'll go with the cornerback room. A lot of people have been talking about Jason Verrett. A lot of people have been talking about Travarius Ward. And then a lot of people have talking about Ambry Thomas. The one guy that many people haven't still talked about, it might lead a little bit into my next segment, is Emmanuel Moseley. I honestly think regardless of who gets healthy and who shows out, Emmanuel Moseley is going to be an outside cornerback for the 49ers in 2022 for the duration or for the entirety of 2022 as long as he's healthy. And that's just because he's the second best corner on this team right now behind Travarius Ward. Jason Verrett is not healthy at the moment. And even when he is, I think he should probably slide into the slot. Moseley proved himself last year. He had a very underrated season. Not many people still don't talk about him. Only 56.6% of his passes attended to him were completed. Really a passer rating of 72, that it was very, very low, above average. And so the entirety of his profile is good. He's physical despite his size. He can tackle well. I think he has a complete profile and should really help this 49er secondary be in the top half of the league 2022.
I love that pick, Rohan, because I love picking players in their contract year, quote unquote.
Yeah,
so this is the last year. E-Man is guaranteed money with the 49ers. So he's not only playing for this year and what the team can accomplish this year, but he's auditioning for the 49ers and for the rest of the league. And a lot of people in the know think that, the reason why the 49ers have drafted so many corners is because a guy like Emmanuel Moseley might be quote unquote cap casualty, where he's going to just price himself out of where the 49ers are willing to spend. Even though I think he's a great corner, I do believe he can get big money, especially if he could just stay healthy this season, because whenever he's healthy, his level of play is always there. Yeah. So I think that is a great pick as somebody who's breakout. Honorable mention as well, I think, is Hufanga, right? Because it's looking like Hufanga is going to get an opportunity to be the starter there. And I think that, he has the IQ to be able to do it. He has the physical ability to be able to do it. And with that opportunity, it's his opportunity now to really show that, he's capable of being the starter alongside Jimmy Ward, who we know, is the stalwart there. I think that, I think that he has an opportunity just because of level of play. But I think the two that we mentioned ahead, Kinlaw and Mosley, are more locks to be able to do that.
Yeah, most definitely. I wanted to give a quick shout out to No Borders Sports and then also my guy Khalid. Thank you guys both for tuning in on this Monday afternoon. Now, let's talk about some underrated players. For me, I was thinking about Emmanuel Mosley. I think he's the most underrated player on the entirety of this roster, but I want to hear your thoughts. Who are some underrated players for this 49ers roster heading into 2023?
So I don't know about if it's necessarily underrated, but I think maybe forgotten is Dre Greenlaw. And the reason why I state that, Rohan, is obviously Dre was injured most of last season, and the play of Aziz Al-Shaair really kind of gave this sense that maybe Dre Greenlaw isn't as needed as, as previously expected, just because the 49ers do such a great job, bringing in and developing linebackers. And Aziz right now is injured, so he isn't, out there fully practicing and things like that. I think Dre Greenlaw, once again, another player that's going to be in a contract year, right? I think this is his last year of his contract as well. So he's going to be auditioning for his next contract. When it was him and Fred Warner, they were already like a really, really imposing duo as far as linebackers. And I don't have any reason to believe that Dre Greenlaw can't be that same type of player with the full availability as well. So for me, it's not that he's underrated, because I think most of the faithful and, overall analysts know what he's capable of doing. He's obviously had some really big moments for the 49ers. I just think he's been forgotten a little bit because of, not playing as much last season. And then also with Aziz Al-Shaair stepping up, I think people forget how much of an impact he can make on this team.
Yeah, that's fair. And I mean, the 49ers have kept him on the roster. Will he be on the roster to start the season? That's something we don't know. The 49ers have a ton of good linebackers and some developable ones. And then obviously their top two, they also signed Oren Burks alongside Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, who was brought back on a one-year deal. If Jeremiah Gemmel shows out, they might trade Dre Greenlaw. Remember, that's not out of the realm given how they traded Jones Griffith last offseason. But he could have another season, and it'd be very cool to see the three top linebackers line up all together. They only lined up in 3 games together last year because Greenlaw was injured with a groin from week 1 after he got that interception to week 8 and then re-injured it. So they were only together for 3 games out of that 17-game season. It'd be cool to see the trio kind of together for a greater portion of the season. So let's see if he remains on the roster. Now, offensively, I'll go first, and I will say it's a guy who we all know to appreciate. He is a Pro Bowler, but still, in a way, he's underrated, and I think his role could even elevate this year. And that's Kyle Juszczyk, the fullback, obviously. Juszczyk is a Pro Bowler just because there aren't many fullbacks in the NFL. He's the best one in the NFL. And so when you look at it, his role, right, he's not a fullback. He's an everything back, really.
Yeah.
He can run the football. He can go out. He can catch passes, be it from the slot, out of the backfield, and obviously he can block. And I think the reason that I'm going to tab him as an underrated guy, how many times did Jimmy Garoppolo miss that wheel route, really? Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers love to run that running back wheel route where it's a clear route on the other side. The wheel route is really that main route where it's just one-on-one, and Juszczyk has just outrun his guy. Now, Trey Lance, like I said earlier, we don't know much about the accuracy, but really his deep ball is one of his biggest strengths. Let's see how it goes during the games, but I think that really Juszczyk has a chance to make an even bigger impact because those wheel route throws that are specifically for Juszczyk, given how good his hands are, I think that they have some chance to make some like, I don't know what the word is, but like really
make some damage. I mean, there was
yeah.
nothing but green grass in front of Juszczyk so many times, and there's a few that stand out like that you knew were going to be touchdowns if Jimmy didn't overthrow him or make him dive for it or lead him in the wrong direction, right, where he runs out of bounds real quick. So yeah, I mean, and I know you've touched on the accuracy, and I think the biggest thing for me with Trey Lance was, when he talked about how big his finger issue was, Rohan. I mean, I really think that played a bigger role in his accuracy more than people maybe realized at the time, just because, they were very coy about that, right? They didn't talk about it too much. I think on the offensive end, I don't know if this is cheating, but I'm going with just the running back room in general. So not too far from what you're saying. And the reason for that is usually in, previous years, Kyle Shanahan has had, running backs with very distinctively different styles. And this running back room doesn't necessarily have like the top end track speed of a guy like Mostert or Breida, in comparison to a guy like Tevin Coleman, like that 2019 running back room year where, they were ranked number 2 as far as in the league as rushing. But I do think that this rushing attack is still going to be very effective. Maybe not for those big 50, 60-yard touchdowns like we were able to see with Mostert, but I do think that this rushing attack needs to get back to averaging over 4.5 yards per carry, because it's going to help out Trey Lance quite a bit, who is his strength is play action, right? So the play action doesn't work if the rushing attack isn't effective. So I do think that this running back room is going to be asked to do a lot, and I do think that they have the capability to do that as well. So I do think that maybe there's a little bit. I think people aren't understanding how important the 3 backs are going to be in, Mitchell, Sermon, and Price. Those 3 guys probably have to be, just as effective as maybe any other position that we're talking about, including guys like Debo, Ayuk, Kittle. Those 3 guys have to be able to do their job. Otherwise, this offense is going to be inept, much like we saw last season, because teams are just going to stack the box or just if they don't respect the rushing attack, it really slows down what this defense is capable of.
Definitely. And before we continue, shout out 49ers Throwback. Thank you so much for tuning in and always retweeting the stuff. But like you said, the running back room definitely has a chance to grow. And with the rookie quarterback, I mean, we've heard it a couple of times this offseason. They don't mind running the ball 30 times a game. Mm-hmm. And so really that's just how they get their physicality. And yeah, a good part of the running back group, you mentioned a good amount of names, but also it's the versatility. You can have guys like Debo Samuel out of the running back, playing running back. You can have Kyle Juszczyk out there. And you can even have all these jet sweep that the 49ers used to run with receivers like Ayuk, McLeod, and all these, and Danny Gray, of course, with that acceleration speed that doesn't really get matched by many defenders. So there's so many ways that the 49ers can run the football: outside zone, inside zone, and all these different varieties. And that's why I think the running back group still, despite maybe being in a different shape than it normally does, no Mostert anymore, it's kind of like a new identity now with this group, right? It still has the potential to make some noise for sure. Now, let's transition from some of these underrated guys, right, to come in. Maybe not necessarily the most important players, but the guys who the season kind of depends on. And those are like the X factors of the wild cards. On offense and defense, who do you think will kind of change this season in a way for the 49ers?
Outside of Trey Lance, obviously, because he is the biggest X factor. Clearly, right. This team is only going to be as successful as, the consistency in Trey Lance's play. So I think that's too much low-hanging fruit, Rohan. So I'm going to I'm going to let go of that one. I'm going to go with Charvarius Ward. And okay. I think the reason for that is, if I think that this season they're going to be playing a lot more press man, right? And one thing that this 49ers schedule doesn't have is a break when it comes to the type of receivers that these corners are going to have to go up against, right? Even, for how inept we think Seattle might be, you still have DK Metcalf there as their, number 1 receiver. Obviously Cooper Kupp with the Rams. Cardinals have D-Hop when he comes back, which is when, the 49ers are actually going to play him. And then, all the teams, from the Raiders, we're playing the Raiders, you're playing Denver. All of these teams that are coming in have just bona fide wide receiver ones, and even their second options are really good. But Charvarius Ward's ability to create an island out there and really not have to have the safeties help on that superstar receiver that Ward is going to go up against, I think is really going to help this offense or this defense reach its potential, right? Because if they can have this Ward Island where they can kind of help out whomever the slot corner is, or help out, or be more aggressive with the safeties as far as rushing and blitzing and things like that. I think that's going to be really what turns this defense from, one that I think is easily going to be top 8 to maybe the best defense in the league. So that's why I think he could be a big X factor. I don't think he necessarily has to play at that level for the 49ers to have a successful defense, but I think that he can elevate this defense to another level if he turns into that type of corner that could just one-on-one be able to lock somebody down to the point where you don't have to help.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, Travis Ward, the 49ers brought him here to be a lockdown corner because there are so many good wide receivers in this division, right? Almost every team has a dominant wide receiver 1 with even a considerable, pretty good wide receiver 2. And that's including the Seattle Seahawks, who aren't necessarily a playoff contending team. They have 2 very good wide receivers, right? So it's important to have that 1-2 lockdown punch, and important to maybe shy away from that zone defense and be more dominant or be more dependent on those type of players, where the 49ers have tried to protect them in the past. Now you kind of have to depend on them, because that's really how you win football games, right? That's why the Rams traded 2 first-round picks for a guy like Jalen Ramsey, right? It's that kind of game changer that you need at the cornerback position. And Ward has the swagger and the demeanor to have that CB1 upside. Let's see how he fares in San Francisco with the amount of talent that he's facing. But he's definitely got the potential to do so. And he's shown over the last 3 years that he can be a lockdown corner in the NFL. You just look at the statistics, right? Top 5 in completion percentage allowed in the entirety of the NFL in regards to man coverage. And average depth of target, he doesn't allow separation yards at all. He's top 5 in that as well. So when you look at the advanced metrics, right, it shows that Travis Ward not only can lock his people down, but he also can get half plays on the ball, and that's important for the 49ers. And so that's really, to me, a very important part of this defense. I'll go the same position group, but a different route. And I'm going to go with whoever starts in the slot. And this is why. For a lot of quarterbacks, their slot option is that safety option. Alongside that tight end, that's the slot option is that third down guy. For us, it's Juwan Jennings in that way too, right? You saw how many times he got a first down on third downs last year. And so really, when it comes down to the line, when you have man-to-man coverage, that slot guy is going to be tasked with taking on that slot wide receiver and stopping those third downs. Because last year, while our defense was great, our third down conversion rate against other teams was not as well. It was, I think, in the middle of the pack, really. And so when you look at it, the one way where you can stop that is to eliminate that slot option, or at least slow down those slot options. And right now, we don't know who's playing slot corner. So I think whoever ends up winning that race, be it Darqueze Dennard, be it Jason Verrett, be it one of the rookies, or whoever it may be, I think that position is going to be very important for the 49ers, because with 2 pretty damn good corners on the outside, that's where they're going to look to target to try and get completions on this defense.
Yeah, and 49ers throwback, I don't know if you see it in the comment section, actually straight up asked that question. So great segue. So I'll let you take it, man. You kind of brushed on it a little bit. Who actually do you think ends up being in that position?
Right. So let's just look at the clues right now. Darqueze Dennard started. Now, do I think that means Darqueze Dennard is going to be the starter? Not necessarily. It just means out of the group that the 49ers had last year, the 49ers trust Darqueze Dennard the most, right? And that group included a guy like Deommodore Lenoir. But remember, week 18 against the Los Angeles Rams, Darqueze Dennard was claimed off the practice squad just 2 weeks before, or a week before. And he comes in and he plays 32% of the defensive snaps in week 18, when Deommodore Lenoir did not play a single snap. Not on special teams, not on defense. So that kind of shows, in a way, their faith in Deommodore Lenoir kind of at that slot spot. They chose a guy who they signed off the streets, a veteran who hasn't necessarily had an amazing season in a while. And he but he played a good amount in that game. And he played some meaningful reps as well. And so out of the group from last year, Dennard, I think, is the guy they trust the most. However, I do think that Jason Verrett could compete for that spot. Samuel Womack, like it's here. They started moving him from both inside and outside, trying to get that versatility. And so it'll be very interesting to see. Dante Johnson is a guy who I've been also clamoring for. He could be even in the mix at free safety as well. But there are a ton of options. At the moment, I'll say this. Denard is the favorite at the moment just because he's got the most knowledge. He has the backing in a way of the coaching staff right now, right? Womack kind of has to take that job. It's Denard's job to lose at the moment because he's the healthiest guy out there who the 49ers trust the most. Now, we don't who's going to end up starting because it's all up to training camp battles really at the end of the day. Like last year, we wouldn't have anticipated Trent Sherfield getting the start over Brandon Ayuk in week 1, but that's happened. So we don't necessarily know who's going to start, but at the moment, Denard is it's Denard's job to lose. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, and I think it's always safer to say in a Kyle Shanahan run team that the veteran is always going to have the leg up over the rookie. And I just think that Shanahan tends to trust vets over rookies. So for me, I think it's really going to be between Quez and Johnson, to be honest, because I think Dante Johnson is a team favorite. I think he's just kind of that player that Shanahan likes because they could ask him to do whatever, and he just goes out there and performs at that level. So it's going to be hard for Dante Johnson, I think, to make the depth chart on as a corner on the outside, right? Because there's just too much there. You mentioned 3 guys that already are ahead of him there, and with Verrett that I think is going to be there. That's 4 guys that are going to be able to play the outside before Dante Johnson even gets a chance. So for Dante Johnson to make the roster, which I think this team wants him to make the roster just because of his versatility and his ability to just be available and play well whenever he is asked to play, I think that they're going to give him an opportunity at that slot position to earn it, right? And I think he's played there before, obviously too sporadically for us to know how consistent he could be at that position. But I would love to see him battle it out there. But I agree with you. I think it's going to be Quez. I think Johnson is in there as well. I think it's going to be a vet over the rookie Womack because from what I'm hearing from guys like Jack Hammer and stuff like that, I don't know if they really want Womack at the slot. I think that they more see him as an outside corner. So he might just be another guy that's there on the depth chart as far as the outside. So my guess, if I'm guessing right now, or I had to put money on it, it'd be between Quez or Johnson.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. We'll see how it boils down. There's a ton of offseason left, obviously, and rookies have a good amount of time to get the playbook under their books, but we'll see. But we talked about some of these X Factor wild cards. Obviously, the biggest one, the one we didn't talk about, is Trey Lance, because this entire season, in a way, is contingent on how he plays. Really, you go as far as a quarterback takes you. The Denver Broncos know that very well. Had a very good defense last year, but fallacies at quarterback, be it Bridgewater or Drew Lock, caused them to have a 7-10 season. And there was another analyst that came out and said some words about Trey Lance, just saying he ain't it. And that was Emmanuel Acho. What do you take of those words? And are you concerned at all with the amount of analysts that are saying such negative things about Trey Lance?
Yeah, I'm not concerned at all. And I actually just did a video this morning kind of talking about this hate that's coming towards Trey Lance. And I think it's just a product of a lot of things. First of all, to specifically answer about Acho, like Acho is a guy who obviously has made the full transition into being a media personality. And he's kind of known for these hot takes now. Like he kind of wants to be kind of the shocking type of guy. But when you listen to him trying to defend his opinion, he didn't even have the right stats, right? He said, the reason why one of his contentions was, if Shanahan believed in him, he would have him start more than one game. Well, he did start more than one game. He started 2 games, and one of those games was a game that was a must-win against Houston. Otherwise, the 49ers wouldn't have made the playoffs, and he went out there and pretty much balled out, especially in that second half, to make sure that the 49ers did have a chance to make it into the playoffs and have the deep run that they actually had. So, and that's kind of like what you hear from all of these so-called analysts or NFL media personalities that are coming out and making these arguments against Trey Lance, when you push them on it, their arguments tend to just disappear, right? And we saw Chris Sims also made a similar statement when it comes to Trey Lance as far as his preparedness and his ability to be an accurate quarterback, stating that, it just seems like it's the thing that he is. Like, you don't see any him getting any better. It just is what it is. Then Jesse puts up a tweet, and to Sims' credit, read it and kind of backed off when Jesse basically said, look, this Houston game that people just act like didn't happen, he went, had a ridiculous completion percentage, showed a lot level of better of accuracy, and game after game after game, you've seen his progression and him get better at that. And Chris Sims had to back off and say, you know what, I think I was mixing up throws and mixing up, times in the year and all this kind of stuff. And that kind of seems to be the trend, Rohan. Whenever it's somebody that's coming out making these statements, it's either based off of hearsay or it's coming from somebody who has nothing to do with the 49ers, like that Philadelphia beat writer that's trying to say that, the 49ers organization is just disappointed with what Trey Lance is doing and stuff like that. Cool. You're in Philly, man. What do you know about what the 49ers locker room is talking about? Or when they do state facts, you push them and ask them a couple follow-up questions, and all of a sudden their argument falls apart. So I'm not too worried about it. I boiled it down to 4 points, Rohan. 1, clickbait, right? Trey Lance gets clicks, so these clicks equals money for these guys, so they talk about it. 2, there's not a rookie that was drafted this year that's supposed to be scheduled to be the starter, and usually that's where most of these analysts, their fuel comes from, is talking about who the rookie starter is going to be. Are they going to be good? Are they going to be bad? There's nobody to talk about because all of the rookies that were drafted are projects that aren't going to be bona fide starters week 1 in the league. So the youngest quarterback that's available to talk about is Trey. So that's the reason why, he's a lot in the news. Obviously, negative news sells better than positive news. So having that hot take that he isn't going to make it is that. Also, the 49ers are a Super Bowl caliber roster. So the quarterback position, like you mentioned, is the most important. And then the last thing I mentioned as far as why all of this is happening is just I think the media is a little bit in their feelings when it comes to the 49ers, and especially how Shanahan and Lynch kind of rubbed it in a lot of these media personalities' faces when everybody thought they were going with Mac Jones and they ended up going with Trey Lance. I think that the interview after that where Kyle Shanahan was kind of like, well, we knew everybody was wrong, but why are we going to get in their way of keeping this wrong, this wrong narrative? I think rubbing it in the faces of the media like that kind of has a target on the 49ers. So you're not going to always see them necessarily favorably covered by some of this national media.
Yeah, I think you made a ton of good points, especially about just the perception and also the amount of the clicks that Trey Lance will generate. Now, for me, I thought that, I'll be honest, a good portion of what Chris Sims said, I thought was okay. Mainly about the inexperience. The reason that he ranked him at 31, he said on his quarterback ranking list, is just because we haven't seen him much. And I think that that's fair, right? I would not rank Trey Lance on any quarterback ranking right now just because we don't know what he is over a full stretch of games, right? Whereas the other quarterbacks on that list, meaning the other rookie quarterbacks, we at least saw them for an extended period of time. But obviously, some of the stuff is misconstrued, like you said with that one Acho statement. And really what I've said, the reason that the 49ers, not the 49ers, but analysts are trying to claw at these little things about Trey Lance, all the other quarterbacks had their criticisms already, right? Trevor Lawrence, he really was the face of a dysfunctional organization, right? He couldn't lead a team, poor throws, a ton of interceptions, and all these little things that they criticized him throughout the entire year. Zach Wilson couldn't stay healthy, really wasn't accurate as much, tried to play too much hero ball, took too many sacks. Davis Mills, he doesn't have arm strength, right? 4 interceptions in a game, super inconsistent. Every quarterback had these little things that people tried to knock off on him. Trey Lance didn't, just because he didn't play. And so now people are saying, okay, this is the 3rd overall pick. We know we can get clicks if we talk about this guy. And also, since there's no information about him, people might perceive what we're saying is true because there aren't really criticisms that you can see yet. And really the national cycle is just, you have to go through the criticisms as long as you go through the positives as well. And so that's where I think a lot of this criticism is stemming from. Obviously, Trey Lance can quiet it with his play, and so that's important. And I understand why I guess he ranked him. It's as part of his job. He has to do this top 40 quarterback ranking every time, and I guess that's why. But yeah, it's a very interesting situation, right? Moreover, we haven't seen what Lance can do. From what we have seen, it's positive. And what we in the early portion of the season, he was injured, right? And then when he was still dealing a little bit with that injury in week 16, he showed out and he played well in the second half of that game, was accurate. That eliminated one concern, completed 70% of his passes, threw for a yards per attempt over 10. It was around 10.5. That was a pretty damn good game from him in terms of that stat as well. And threw to all facets of the field. We'll see how it goes over a 17-game season. But right now, I think a ton of the criticism is just unwarranted and, like you said, generated for clicks, because that's what national media can get. Because they're not going to be blamed if they're wrong. It's because a ton of people just don't know what's happening with Trey Lance. So it's not like they'll be blamed. It's only 49er fans really that are going to hate on him. But the 49er fans generate the national, the national media. And so everybody kind of gets to see it. That creates clicks and that type of thing. But really, go ahead.
No, and I think it's just like, if there was 5 rookies that were drafted this year, even 3 rookies that were drafted this year that were going to go out and start, like if there was a rookie for Carolina that was going to start, a rookie for, let's say Pittsburgh that was going to start, and a rookie for what's another team that, that is maybe the Saints, right? That was going to start. I think Trey Lance doesn't get as much focus because it'll be broken with, these other rookies that are starting. I think that's why last year as well, there wasn't these narratives that were created, even though he still had only played 1 year of football in college. He still, was somebody who didn't throw the ball a lot in college, and all these things that are being brought up now weren't discussed as much because they had to split their time between Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, and Justin Fields and Mac Jones, right? So there was 5 different quarterbacks to talk about. Now the only young quarterback that's starting this year that wasn't a starter last year is Trey Lance, which is why all eyes are on Trey Lance. And I think it's just kind of like a product of just where the quarterback position is at with the league, because so many guys are bringing in either veterans or guys that are already proven. Trey Lance is like the only kind of like question mark there. And for some reason, all of a sudden, question mark means worse. And I just don't understand that. We see that narrative when it comes to the offensive line, when it comes to the defensive line, when it comes to quarterback play. I just don't necessarily buy that unknown necessarily means bad. It can mean bad, could also mean good, right? But for some reason, everybody just wants to automatically say, oh, you're worse because you have an unknown there. Well, I'm pretty sure when Tristan Wirfs was an unknown for Tampa Bay, they were happy with what that unknown turned out to be. Or when Creed Humphreys was an unknown for Kansas City, they were pretty happy with what Creed Humphreys turned out to be. So, it's just right now there's no football actually being played. So it's best. The only way you get clicks is, well, not the only way, but the easiest way to get clicks is go after big names negatively and you're going to get clicks. So I think that's kind of where people are right now.
Yeah, I agree. And speaking of Trey Lance, he obviously flashed in week 1 of OTAs. In the one media practice that people saw, he completed a significant portion of his passes. What are we looking forward to this upcoming week in OTAs to wrap today off?
Yeah, I think there's some battles that are going to be important to see, right? So I think the 2 battles that I'm really looking for, I think there's 3 battles that I'm looking for. The battle, obviously, who's going to start at the opposite safety alongside Ward or Jimmy Ward, who's going to be that second safety, who's going to be the slot corner. And the other competition that I really want to see is is Brunskill going to end up being the right guard, or is Jalen Moore going to be able to show enough to take that position from Brunskill. So those are, I think, the biggest questions that I want to see answered from training camp is those three positions, who's going to separate themselves and kind of grab hold of the starter position there.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, really, what we're looking forward to right now, there are a ton of these battles where it's not necessarily battles, but there are a ton of these positions where the starter isn't there right now, right? You look at left tackle, Trent Williams isn't playing, which means Colton McKivitz gets an extended look at left tackle. Like you said, Daniel Brunskill dealing with knee tendonitis. He isn't out there. Jalen Moore, who the 49ers plan to move to right guard this offseason, he's now getting a first team reps, and really the team gets a good look on how he's playing. At linebacker, Aziz Al-Shire isn't practicing, right? Which means some other linebackers, maybe even a Dre Greenlaw, gets they get an extended look on Dre Greenlaw. And so like these are at several positions. And then obviously we have the positions at like safety where Hufanga is starting, but there's still a couple of other players that could take over that position, like the newcomer George Odom, maybe even Tarvarius Moore if his athleticism still shows following his torn Achilles. So there's still a ton of unknowns as to these positions, not only at the starting level, but also at the backup level, and a lot of opportunity that's thrown out there. That's what I'm looking forward to kind of in week 2. Who emerges out of this good amount of opportunity that is presented to all these players?
Absolutely. And obviously when as we're getting closer and closer, there's some big names that we want to see who ends up showing up. At week 2 of OTAs, is it still optional? When does it become mandatory?
Only mandatory in June 13 to 15th, mandatory.
Gotcha.
The entire of OTAs is optional.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting. Not only what we just discussed, and then just seeing which rookies are able to show out. Right, last year during these OTAs, a guy like Elijah Mitchell was somebody who, when I was doing my shows with Jack and Grant and stuff like that, he was kind of somebody that people were like, wait a minute. There's a lot of this guy is something special, right? They just saw something that he popped out compared to everybody else on the field, and obviously that translated into being having a breakout year when he got the opportunity when Mostert went down. To see kind of what rookies are able to stand out that way would be interesting to see. Is it a guy like Danny Gray? Is it a guy like Womack? Is it a guy like Drake? Or is it somebody that was a late round pick that we don't even know about, that, or we're not even, really eyeing, that can be a starter, like a guy like Spencer Buford, who might come out and, shock the world or whatever the case may be. So it's going to be interesting as seeing. And obviously they have a guy in Tyrion Davis-Price who's going to get opportunities. How good is he going to look? So there's a lot. I mean, it's exciting because of how much youth there is on this team and the fact that there are some question marks or unknowns. To kind of get some answers there, we're looking for as much information as we can gather.
Yeah, definitely. And before we conclude, I wanted to say shout out to Aaron. Thank you, 49ers First Takes, for tuning in on this Monday afternoon. And real quick, shout out to all the veterans out there that support our country. Thank you so much for your service. Happy Memorial Day to everybody. Suneil, thank you so much for coming on. Great show that we had today. We'll see you for on Wednesday. It's a bit of the unknown right now, but if not, thank you guys all for tuning in. We will catch you guys next week. And yeah, have a great Memorial Day.